And away we go. So hello and welcome to this program of the University of Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center. We are extremely pleased to be able to bring you these educational programs and help support small businesses. Please be advised again that we will be recording the webinar for ASB TDC education purposes, and you will be able to find this recording by tomorrow at our website, sbtdc.uark.edu, and we will post that direct link in the chat. So I'm Amy Robinson, and our team today consists of my consulting colleague and co-hosts, Catherine Corley and Chris Case. Say hello. And our presenters, Center Director Mary Beth Brooks and Specialty Consultant Scott Lacey. We are also thankful to have attorneys Morgan Johnson and Steve Brooks of Eldridge Brooks Partners. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate you guys. I'd like to turn it over to Catherine right now and tell you a little bit about ASB TDC, how you can find us and benefit from our services, and how we will stay in touch and connected and available to you while you are navigating PPP after this webinar. Catherine?
Thank you, Amy. The ASB TDC is a one-stop shop for startups and existing small businesses. And as Amy said, we're associated with the University of Arkansas. We're also affiliated with the Small Business Administration, the SBA, and the statewide Arkansas Small Business Technology and Development Center, as well as a national network of more than 1,000 small business owners. Here locally, we offer no-cost one-on-one consulting that ranges from business planning to market analysis to specialty consulting and to helping you understand and get through PPP. If you're already a client, hello. If you are not a client and would like to benefit from our one-on-one support, you can find us at sbtdc.uark.edu, and we have posted the link to how you can register in the chat.
Yes.
Finally, we know how crucial this time is for you, so we will also be hosting a weekly PPP Q&A session every Thursday at noon, starting tomorrow and running through February 11th. You will be receiving that link for tomorrow via email after this presentation. After that, these will be posted in our events page, also being posted in the chat. Please make note of all these links. We will post them again at the end of the webinar.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. Now, without further hesitation, we have a lot of ground to cover today. We are covering everything from the Payment Protection Program, or PPP as it's known, first and second draw. We're also covering the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL, or EIDL, if you've heard it said that way, and the Employee Retention Tax Credit. And as we mentioned, we will continue to mention over and over again that everything we cover here today is subject to updates to the rules. So please plan to stay in touch with us and become a client or participate in the PPP Q&A sessions so that you're up to date on the latest and specific to your business information. So now I'm going to change over, and without further ado, we are going to get started with Mr. Scott. Scott, how are you today? And we are getting underway. How is everything in your world? Are you there, Scott?
Yeah, doing real good. We're glad to finally get some of this information out to all of our small business owners across the state. And like Amy and Catherine said, if you've got something to write with, get ready. There's a lot of information. We're going to go through as much of it as we possibly can to give you a really good overview so that you can begin preparing to apply and even possibly begin applying. So today's agenda, as we've already mentioned, we're going to be going over what's been shorthand called the Economic Aid Act that was passed in late December and signed into law. We're going to be covering PPP 1 and 2, the second draw, as well as EIDL, the Shutter Venue Grant, the SBA Debt Relief Program, and the Employee Retention Tax Credit. A lot of this legislation was based around improving the existing Paycheck Protection Program, and so there's going to be some good benefits in there for you to listen to as well. But before we get to that, I want to let you know about some resources that we have available for you, as well as where a lot of this information comes from. So if you need to, you can go and read specifically about these things yourself. that you also know where the information is coming from. So the first thing I would encourage you to do is to click the link when you receive this PowerPoint or when it's posted on our website to sign up as a client. Like I said, we're going to do our best to answer all of your questions today and to go through as much information as possible. But there is a lot of very specific information and a lot of very specific case-by-case issues that are going to come up. We're going to do our best to address those, but would encourage you to sign up as a client. So if that question does not get answered today, we can walk you through it individually with one of our business consultants. Second on the list and third are the Paycheck Protection Program interim final rules. This is the official documentation released between a partnership of the Treasury Department and the Small Business Administration, giving official guidance on how to interpret the Economic Aid Act and how it was passed and how to implement it and what some of the more specific issues are. And that is where a majority of this information is coming from today, and you'll have access to that as well. Then we also have the borrower application for both the PPP-1 reopening as well as the second draw. Both of those applications are available. There's a lot of good information there. And then other resources such as the EIDL loan application and the ability to look up low economic zones and other relevant items that are going to be brought up today. Okay, so first thing we're going to dive into is just the Paycheck Protection Program in general. Just for anybody who isn't as familiar or needs a quick refresher, what is the Paycheck Protection Program? And just real simply, it's U.S. Small Business Administration backed loans that were passed with the intent purpose of keeping businesses open and employees employed. That's the name, Paycheck Protection. It's made by a bank to a business, so not directly from the government to a business, but instead from a bank to a business, but the government backs the loan. And the general broad guidelines to make sure that you get that loan forgiven are to spend 60% of whatever you receive on eligible payroll expenses, and a maximum of 40% on other eligible expenses. So we can go down to the next two slides. So to the next one. So here are the big headline improvements to the Paycheck Protection Program that we want everybody to know about. First of all, is streamlined. There's going to be a streamlined forgiveness process for both the reopened PPP-1 and PPP-2, the second draw. It's going to be a one-page forgiveness application that is for businesses that are applying for $150,000 or less. And the stipulations on that are basically that you will just have to certify and essentially swear to on paper that the information that you're providing is correct, but then make sure that if you're audited or if it's asked for later or needed to be provided later before forgiveness, you're able to provide those details. Second big one is that if you've received a PPP loan or will receive a PPP loan and it's forgiven, those forgiven loans, which are usually counted as income and you're taxed on, for the PPP loan specifically, you're not going to be taxed as you typically would be on this loan when it's forgiven. Next, EIDL advanced grants. Some of you received. They're on your forgivable portion for your payroll protection program forgiveness. That grant amount is no longer deducted from your total forgiveness eligibility, which is good news to a lot of people. Next, the PPP and the EIDL eligible expenses are tax deductible, and the eligible expenses are retroactive. The new eligible expenses are retroactive. Additionally, when you're choosing your covered period, you now have the option of choosing from a minimum of 8 weeks up to a maximum of 24 weeks for your covered period that you're going to use these loan funds for. And the interest rate on the PPP is non-compounding and non-adjustable for all, which is helpful as well. And finally, it was really important to mention that the second draw specifically was targeted towards small businesses specifically that were harder hit. So our smaller businesses were sure to get some more of those funds. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the simplified forgiveness form for loans of $150,000 less. Like I said earlier, it's going to be a one-page forgiveness application for both PPP-1 and PPP-2 loans. And the requirements for you are to provide the number of employees that you retained due to receiving the PPP loan, the amount of the loan proceeds you received and spent on payroll, the total of the loan. Then you're going to have to certify that you're going to keep all the records. You've got to keep those records for up to 4 years. So that will be a simplified one-page form that's coming out very soon. For the excluded, so before we dive into everything, just in case anybody is on here who wants to see if they do qualify for the loans, people specifically who don't qualify or aren't eligible. One, if you were ineligible for PPP1, or if you applied and were rejected, you're not going to be eligible for round 2. If your business is just generally engaged in political activities, you won't be eligible. Or also, if you're here to learn about the Live Venue Grant, if you do apply for that grant and you do receive that grant, you will not be eligible for PPP Draw 2. You're also ineligible if you're a publicly traded company, are permanently closed, or if you already received, which this won't apply to anybody just yet, but if you've already received PPP2. So if you received Draw 2, you're not eligible to apply for a second Draw 2. Okay, so now we're moving on to the next slide. So there have been some questions about everybody just calling the Paycheck Protection Program the second round, and there are specifically 2 parts to this Paycheck Protection Program. The first part is the original Paycheck Protection Program is being reopened. So if you did not apply last year to the original Paycheck Protection Program, you may be able to apply for that now. The second part is what they're calling Draw 2, which is for people who already applied and received funds from PPP1. So this slide specifically addresses the reopened Paycheck Protection Program. So like I said, it's primarily for those who received PPP1, but other people can request an increase if they want. Let me pull up my notes on that. So who can, so when PPP1 was reopened, you can apply if you had never applied, or you can apply or modify PPP1 and get an increase if, 1, you didn't receive forgiveness yet, or you returned some or all of your PPP funds that you originally received, or if you did not accept the full amount that you were eligible for. Reopen PPP also requires borrowers to have been open and in operation on February 15th of 2020. It now includes sole proprietorships, independent contractors, as well as eligible self-employed individuals. It's also open for nonprofits, specifically 501c3s, 501c19s veteran organizations, 31B2C tribal business concerns, and those have a different employee calculation on them of less than 500 employees, which you can see and reference in the Paycheck Protection Program interim final rule on page 13, which is listed on the resources page in this PowerPoint presentation. 501c6 organizations like Chamber of Commerce's and housing co-ops are also eligible. News organizations are also now eligible under certain circumstances. If you are a news organization and would like to apply, please get in touch with us so we can explain that more in detail to you. The maximum loan for PPP1 is the lesser of 2.5 times your payroll, your monthly payroll, or $10 million, and you have a $100,000 max per employee eligibility with an interest rate of 1% at a 5-year maturity. Okay, so now probably to what most people are looking for, which is the second draw eligibility. So you're eligible for the second draw if you received Paycheck Protection Program funds on round 1, and you spent all of those funds before Paycheck Protection 2 is dispersed. So if you haven't spent all those funds, you can go ahead and apply. You just got to make sure that those funds get spent before your draw 2 is dispersed. It's limited to 300 employees or fewer. That was a stipulation in order to better target smaller businesses. You also have to prove that you had a 25% reduction in gross receipts in comparable quarters from 2019 to 2020. If you don't have quarterly information, because we know a lot of our small businesses don't necessarily keep quarterly information but deal better with annual information, you still can prove your 25% reduction in gross receipts using annual information. You just have to have your tax forms from 2019 and get your tax forms from 2020 done so you can compare those 2 years to prove your reduction in gross receipts. You, just like the regular Paycheck Protection Program, you have to have been in business as of February 15th, 2020. The amount is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll, or $2 million, as opposed to the $10 million for the reopened PPP-1. And in the case that you are in the hospitality industry, or if you have a NICS code 72, if you're a NICS code 72 business, you can apply for 3.5 times your average monthly payroll with a maximum of $2 million. So good news for our restaurants there. Okay, so how do you calculate your 25% reduction in gross receipts? We're going to run through this quickly. You need to demonstrate a 25% reduction in gross receipts in quarter 1, 2, 3, or 4 of 2020 relative to the same quarter in 2019. So you can pick a quarter in 2020 that you were really down and compare it to a quarter in 2019, the same quarter. So quarter 3 to quarter 3, or quarter 4 to quarter 4. A lot of you probably can use quarter 2. And as long as you're down in your gross receipts by 25%, you do qualify. You had to have been in operation for all of 2019 and 2020. You don't have to have been. If you were in operation in 2019 and 2020, you can submit your tax returns for the whole years as opposed to comparing quarters. For loans up to $150,000, you can simply certify your revenue loss when you apply, but then before you get your forgiveness, you'll have to provide the documentation. And that's simply to speed the process along in order to get this money to you as quickly as possible, which was another thing that the Congress really wanted to get done, to get this money to you as quickly as possible. A lot of people also asked about if you receive PPP-1 funds and those were forgiven, are those going to count in your gross receipts? And they are not. So gross receipts for 2020 will not be included, or if your PPP-1 funds will not be included. Okay, next slide, please. If you were not in business in 2019, if you were not in business during quarter 1 or quarter 2 of 2019, but you were in business in quarter 3 and quarter 4 of 2019, and this gets a little complicated, but it's simple once you get it in your head. You may compare any quarter of 2020 with quarter 3, quarter 4 of 2019 to determine your reduction in gross receipts. And I'll just go over the next two as well real quick. If you were not in business during Q1, Q2, or Q3 of 2019, but you were in business in Q4, you may compare any quarter in 2020 to Q4 of 2019 to determine the reduction of gross receipts. Basically, just to sum this slide up, they're doing everything that they can to allow you to be able to show that you were down 25% because they know a lot of you were. So again, if you want to go over this with somebody in person because it's really detailed and might deserve a better explanation, especially to some of you who are just listening in on the phone, please get in touch with one of our consultants and sign up as a client with the ASB TDC. So how do you calculate how much you're eligible for? I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, how much can I get, which is on the next slide. And so here's the basic calculation. It's your 12-month aggregate eligible payroll cost divided by 12 times 2.5. You do have to subtract from your aggregate payroll cost any compensation paid to an employee that is over $100,000. So if you have an employee over $100,000 who's making $100,000, let's say they're making $120,000, that excess $20,000 in their compensation you cannot include in your aggregate payroll cost for this calculation. If you're a NICS code 72 business, instead of multiplying by 2.5, you multiply times 3.5, and this is for a 12-month period. And the legislation has allowed for more flexibility in this than the original PPP-1 program. You can use 2019 payroll, 2020 payroll, or the 12 months previous to the funds disbursement for your draw too. So there's a lot of flexibility in the 12-month period that you can select. Your aggregate payroll costs have also been expanded. They're listed here in the PowerPoint. For those on the phone just listening, I'll go ahead and list them as salary, wages, commissions, tips, payments for vacation or leave, allowance for separation or dismissal, insurance, retirement benefits, state and local taxes assessed on compensation. If you file for your business or for your self-employment a 1040 Schedule C, you're going to use your line 31, your net profit on your 1040 Schedule C, and it's a maximum of $100,000. If you're a partnership, you'll want to look at the PPP application, page 3, section 2, as well as the interim final rule, page 40 and 42. Again, complicated and trying to go over it fast, so please get in touch with a consultant and we can answer those questions more specifically for you and take the time to explain. In the interim final rules, they do have some good examples listed for how to calculate your the loan amount that you might be eligible for. And I've listed 2 of those examples here. There are more for other types of businesses as well. So I'm going to briefly go over this. So if the situation that is given is that you don't have any employees that make more than $100,000 and your annual or your 12-month eligible payroll is $120,000, then your calculation for your average monthly payroll is your annual payroll, which is $120,000 divided by 12, the months, which is $10,000. And so you'll take $10,000 and you'll multiply it times 2.5, which is given in the legislation, to give you a total eligible loan amount of $25,000. That will be your maximum. That's the simple explanation. And then on the next slide, we have a second example that's a little more complicated, but still simplified. If your given situation is that you're applying for the draw 2, and you have a few employees that are making more than $100,000, and your annual or your 12-month aggregate payroll is $1.5 million, and the total compensation for employees making over $100,000 in excess of $100,000 is $300,000, and your business has an NAICS code of 72, then your calculation is this. Your eligible payroll is 1.5 minus your excess payroll over 100,000, which is 300,000, for a total aggregate of 1.2 million. You divide 1.2 million divided by your 12-month period for 100,000 on average a month. And then because you have a NAICS code 72 that starts with 72, you'll multiply that times 3.5, which gives you a total maximum eligibility of $350,000. You can see those examples on the interim final rule, page 32 and 32 to 34. Okay, so what all can you include in your forgiveness application? Remember, we can spend 60% of what you receive on payroll and 40% on other expenses. So what are those other expenses that you can potentially use these funds for? So after payroll, it will be things like utilities, rent is also included, costs related to employee sick, medical and family leave, mortgage interest, and that word interest is key there. It cannot be used to pay for any of your mortgage principal, only mortgage interest. Operations expenditures, property damage costs, supplier cost, and perishable goods. And each of those last 3 that are starred have some very specific language associated with them. And that's on interim final rule, page 48 to 52, if you want to write that down, or you can get in touch with us at the center and we can go over that with you. And then on the next slide, there's a few more forgivable expenses. You can also use this money to pay for interest on debt incurred before February 15th, 2020. On another new one is business software or cloud computing services. That's to help people who had to go remote and needed to accommodate for the remote work due to the coronavirus. Non-covered property damage due to looting or violence or the riots is what they're trying to address as well as a new one. Worker protection, allowance for separation or dismissal, payment of state local taxes. And again, those are on page 48 to 52 of the IFR. Okay, so that was a lot of information really quick. Again, if you've got some questions, please put them in the chat box or get in touch with us at the ASB TDC. And I'm sure you're all wondering, how do I apply now? And for that, our Senate Director, Mary Beth Brooks, is going to take over and explain that to you.
Thank you, Scott. Real quick, I just want to remind everybody that you are welcome to be putting your questions in the chat and in Q&A. We are monitoring all of those. This is a fire hose of information, and so you go ahead and take a breath, and if you have some questions, put them in there. If we cannot answer them right now or directly today, please know that we are making note of all of those. These are great questions for your one-on-one consulting session, or for the Q&A, PPP Q&A sessions that we'll have on a weekly basis. So we are paying attention. We are looking at everything. So keep those coming and let us know what questions you have. We also will have all of those resources completely available to you. And so nothing that you put out there will get lost. So keep it coming. Mary Beth.
Great. Hey, thanks so much to everybody for coming today. I'm thrilled this legislation was passed to provide some relief to so many of you who really need it. One thing to reiterate before I move on is get with your banker, get with your CPA. Two of my primary concerns are make sure that you're visiting and staying in good close contact with those folks. For the application process, right now, only CDFIs are allowed to accept applications and banks, but they're going to open up shortly. The majority of our banks in Northwest Arkansas are going to be accepting applications, but the most that we have spoken to already are only taking applications for bank customers. So check with your banker soon to understand their process and to get an idea. More than likely, a lot of them are going to continue doing portals, but just to better understand how their approach. There were a few banks in the area that are doing both for customers and non-customers, but the majority were just handling it for customers. Unlike PPP round one, I really feel like the allocation for eligible applicants is better this time. So I don't think they're going to run out of money in a few days like it did the very first time. The application deadline is March 31st or until the funding is gone. Any bank who accepted them before is allowed to do it, but a few might choose not to do it. You do not have to apply for PPP2 using the same lender as you did with PPP1, but the documentation side seems to me like it sure should be easier if you do that. So like if you choose to use, when Scott was talking through payroll numbers and whatever, if you choose to use the 2019 payroll numbers, which a lot of my clients are using, your bank already has that data from whenever they were processing your PPP1. So hopefully that should save you some time. Also, just a quick reminder on the application that all owners with 20% or more ownership are going to have to sign that application. So next slide. As you recall from last time, each bank had their own documentation requirements, but I've listed a lot of those for you because you're going to see a lot of these as requirements. So I have a couple of slides on this. Of course, first thing you're going to have to do is complete the application. For loans over $150,000, you'll have to provide proof of the required revenue reduction that Scott was talking about. He reviewed all those requirements. So it could be that you just provide tax returns. If you don't want to do the quarterlies, you just are providing 1920 tax returns, but you can also provide with those quarterlies that I think that a lot of folks are going to be giving as well. So be putting that information together right now so that you'll have it ready for your banker. For loans under 150,000, yes, you do not have to provide that proof, but the key is you don't have to provide the proof at the time of application, but you will have to provide it. So don't think you're going to get away without providing it at all. So I'd go ahead and get all that together to stay on top of it. Many banks will need to understand also company your ownership structure, just to where they make sure that everyone signs the application. So you're going to see a lot of that. Some banks are also going to require tax returns, even if you're not using your tax, like the 2019 and 2020 taxes to prove that reduction in revenue. Next slide. Again, all this documentation would have been supplied for PPP1 if you're looking for PPP2. But if you've kind of slept since then, like I have, and for me right now, if I look back at March of 2020, I feel like it's been about a decade ago. So you maybe have forgotten some of the things. So I quickly will list them for you. I'm sure you're going to, you're going to expect to see all the payroll documents that are going to be required and the corporate documents. But remember to also have your proof of payments of all the insurance, the employer portion of the payment for the benefit coverage, like the health insurance, life insurance, disability, vision, dental, and retirement contributions. You guys might remember from PPP1 that was not spelled out as clearly for PPP1. So now this time they spelled it out very clearly. Shouldn't be any question. All of those benefits should be covered for the employer portion of that payment. Next slide. Certifications. I just want to remind you that each owner is going to have to sign off on several, all these representations, authorizations, certifications. So be prepared for that. And that's you're going to say, you're going to have to sign off and initial that you are an eligible entity and you're in operation on February 15th of 2020, that you are not permanently closed. That's something a little different than a lot of like Arkansas businesses who applied for the business interruption grant. They didn't ask that question, and a lot of businesses who were closed ended up with that grant. This will require you to say that you are not permanently closed, that you've had at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts, that these economic times are going to make you require you to get this loan, and that you've received your PPP-1 loan and you've dispersed all the funds for eligible expenses. So, and of course, then you're going to have to say, yes, the application is correct. I know I've already been getting a lot of questions on this particular line, that you have received your PPP-1 loan and dispersed all of the funds for eligible expenses. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to end up with, or that you've already received full forgiveness, or that you were going to even end up with full forgiveness. But you attested on the PPP-1 application that you would only spend the money on eligible expenses. So this is confirming that you've done that. Next slide. The application can be found on the SBA website or on our resources slide. Remember, most banks are not going to necessarily use this application. Most of them don't, at least in Northwest Arkansas. They're going to have their own application, but it's going to be similar information. So I just wanted you to see how easy it is. And I think most of it really is easily understood by just reviewing the instructions on the 3rd page of the app. But I do want to review a few things with you. The NAICS code, you will see kind of middle, a little bit to the right, NAICS code. That is just an industry classification code. So all the bankers that are on the call know very well about a NAICS code, but a lot of the rest of you maybe are not as familiar. So just as a reminder, if you were trying to claim a 72 NAICS code, which would be like 72143 or whatever it is, it needs to match your last tax return that you filed. So if you filed a tax return and it had 48236, they very well are not going to accept it as a 72 NAICS code. The reason the 72 NAICS code is important is what Scott mentioned earlier. Those are primarily like restaurants and in that type business, and they get to use the product number of 3.5 instead of the 2.5. So that's where your NAICS code is. You can also use on our resource page where I gave you a little quick blurb and a connector to where you could look up your NAICS code. Next, if you look at that right below there, kind of below there, closer to the bottom on the left, you'll see the times 2.5 plus EIDL box. Yeah, I'm on the previous slide. Sorry, Amy. You see where it is, the times 2.5 plus the EIDL. I think that's really deceptive, so I wanted to go through it with you. It says add the EIDL, but you only are going to add this EIDL only if your loan was received before April 3rd of 2020. So my assumption is out of our 200 participants today that no one received their EIDL loan prior to April 3rd, 2020, if they live in the state of Arkansas. So I just to give you that caveat to be looking at, it's kind of deceptive, I feel like. So don't feel like you're going to put your EIDL loan number in there or amount unless you really did receive it prior to April 3rd. And 3, under purpose, refer to the 2nd paragraph on the instructions for more detail. But I'll just tell you that the majority of the clients that I've already looked at these applications with so far, they're going to check a lot of these boxes: payroll, rent, mortgage interest, because the question is the purpose of the loan. So it's not just going to be a check payroll, but it's going to be, I'm looking at several of these costs. Next slide. So this is just the other half of that first page, super simple and straightforward. These are questions about bankruptcies, felonies, SBA loan delinquencies, if you live in the United States or not, and if you're a franchise. So pretty simple. And I didn't even include the last page for you because the last page of the application is a list of those reps and certifications that you're going to have to review. I reviewed it a couple of slides ago, so you really shouldn't have any surprises there. Let's go on. The SBA extended the application period for the economic injury disaster loans, the EIDL loans, because of the pandemic. So they moved the deadline back to December 31st of 2021. So they've already approved like 198, like close to $200 billion in these loans. for small businesses. And remember, these are for working capital. So fabulous fixed rate of 3.75% fixed for 30 years. And yes, that really is true, 3.75% fixed for 30 years, and then a 2.75% fixed for nonprofits. If you're still looking for resources, this could be a really good option for you. You apply directly through the SBA, not through your bank. They're not going to put everything on the poor banks. So you're going to do this one directly through the SBA. Last time around, it was a super simple 4-page application that they continued to improve over the course of time. So I assume they will be doing the same. Right now, if you look on their website, you won't be able to do this yet, but this should be able to be an option pretty soon because they're working on their website. Also, just as a reminder, there's an automatic 1-year deferment before monthly payments begin. Again, this is where this is where you apply, and I have that link in that on the slide earlier for resources. So just my last reminder, these are actually loans. They're not grants. They're not going to be forgiven. Next one. Congress has also allocated like $20 billion for EIDL advances. So it's pretty amazing in the new stimulus bill. So just to remind you, in case anybody hasn't gone through this before, or in case you applied for the EIDL loan and you did not check, I would like the advance. The CARES Act that was passed way back last March, they included a grant or an advance for those who applied for the EIDL loan in the amount of up to $10,000. So the SBA later just all of a sudden decided they were going to do $1,000 per employee. So a whole lot of business owners were pretty frustrated that they didn't get the full $10,000. And in addition, a lot of folks were then trying to apply for the grant, and then the funds were exhausted. So they closed them down, never reopened them. So this new legislation really appears to just help address any of those concerns. They're an extension of that original CARES Act requirement, but it's a little bit different, and they have some different requirements. So to qualify for this new one, if you want to try to get the full targeted $10,000 EIDL grant, and again, truly this part is a grant, the business has to, 1, be located in a low income community, 2, suffered economic loss greater than 30%, and 3, employ fewer than 300 employees. So those are a little bit different than before. That before it didn't require any kind of proof of an economic loss, and it didn't require it was higher with 500 employees, and also it was you didn't have to be located in a low income community. They're really trying to specifically target those who they think need it the most. So economic loss, gosh, it's quite the definition. So I'll at least read part of it to you. The amount by which gross receipts declined during an 8-week period between random dates, March 2nd of 2020, December 17th of 2021. And you have to compare that to a different 8-week period before the disaster. So I'm sure the SBA is going to come up with a formula as well for seasonal businesses. And then we're going to have that more, we're going to clarify exactly how they plan for you to have to prove that. The other big question out there that I seem to not be able to get answered by the SBA or by anyone so far as well is how to deem low-income community. So again, bankers in the room understand and know about census tracts and about low to moderate income census tracts, but everybody else doesn't really have to deal with that all the time. I did include on the resource page a place where you could look at at least opportunity zones. You could key in your address and see if your address for your business falls into an opportunity zone, which would also be those low-income communities. My assumption is that the SBA is going to come up with a specific way that you can do that. So probably they're going to add something to their website, but right now I have zero information for you on how they are actually going to determine that. So that's going to be out there looming for their next release of information. If you have already received an EIDL grant, even if it was in May or June of 2020, and it was for less than $10,000, and if your business isn't located in a low-income community, supposedly, now let me underline, supposedly, the SBA is going to notify you of how you can apply for the remaining amount. So make sure you're checking the email that you submitted, make sure that it's not going to your trash in your inbox, all of that. I'm assuming they're going to also release more information to allow people to actually just go online to apply for the rest of it. So say if you got $3,000 and you meet these other qualifications, you should be able to get the additional $7,000. That's what this legislation is supposedly put forth, but they have not been able to answer to me how they're going to do that yet. Upon application of any of these EIDL loans and grant requests and whatever, the SBA has 21 days to respond to the application. Last year we had, some people not receiving information back for several months, so they're guaranteeing that they will speed up this process. So really the next step is for the SBA to issue guidance and instructions, and they've indicated that a new disaster loan portal is going to open up, and they've even said by January 17th, so that's just in 4 days. So we don't have very long to wait. Next slide. Gosh, the bill, this new bill provides for a lot, for $15 billion in funding for SBA grants. And these are true SBA grants, not loans, for up to $10 million to live venues, independent movie theaters, and cultural institutions to address the economic effects of the pandemic. Yeah, the grants can be used to cover various very specific expenses, payroll, rent, utilities, PPE, those kind of things. You can tell they've really thought through this one. I think a lot of the venues had a lot of say-so on how they were going to do this, because they wanted to make sure they were targeting specific groups who had the most economic injury. And they're going to do it through periods. The majority of this group doesn't really care, I realize, because most of you are not going to qualify for this, but we have like one person on our team who really is knowledgeable on this information. But just to tell you, like with this particular piece, you apply through the SBA, but it's also over 14-day periods. So for the first 14-day periods, it's only for venues who can prove that they have lost over 90% of their gross receipts in that period of time. So it's quite staggering and exciting for them that they could actually apply. They are only those folks are allowed to apply the first 14 days. And then the second 14 days is for the next group down. And then it will open up to the rest. So I'm not going to go again into a whole lot of detail here since so few businesses and nonprofits are on the webinar who are going to be eligible. But I do want to make it really clear that there are very specific stipulations for these grants. So don't feel like, gosh, I have a singer who comes to my restaurant on Friday nights and I pay him and he gets tips and he just wants to get out there. That's not going to, though that is not going to qualify for this type live event venue grant. They have numbers and very specific requirements. Like on one, it's 70% of your revenue has to come through ticket sales. So if you are a regular restaurant, and of course, if you're looking at revenue streams and your top revenue stream is the sale of food, and the next one is the sale of beverages, and then you maybe get $10,000 a year, which is only a tiny portion of your income out of providing any kind of live music or whatever, then you're not going to qualify. The caveat I want to make sure I give you too is you cannot apply for both this and the PPP. So the last thing you want to do is apply for this, get rejected, and then you can't apply for the PPP. So just be really careful and read through all of those definitions before jumping in there and trying to apply for that. Next slide. This bill also provides $3.5 billion to resume debt relief payments it's principal and interest payments on small business loans that are guaranteed by the SBA under their 7A, 504, and microloan programs. So all borrowers with qualifying loans approved by the SBA prior to the CARES Act, so prior to March, will receive an additional 3 months of principal and interest payments starting in February. And going forward, those payments are going to be capped at like $9,000 per borrower per month. After that 3-month period, borrowers considered to be underserved, and I say that like a little air quotes, namely like the smallest or the hardest hit by the pandemic, are going to receive an additional 5 months of P&I payments. And those are also going to be capped at $9,000 per borrower per month. So that's really great news. But of course, I got to tell you, I'm not really sure how they're going to define smallest and hardest hit. So that remains to be seen, and I'm sure we'll be getting some answers. Also, some great news on new SBA loans, SBA payments. principal and interest on any new loan that's initiated now between February 1st and September 30th. They're going to get 6 months of P&I payments made. And those are also capped at $9,000 a month. So great news on that front from this bill for the SBA, all SBA loans. So I'm going to pass it on to Morgan, or Morgan and Steve.
Got to unmute myself. Yes, we are going to pass it over to Morgan. Again, we are posting links. If you need a consultation, basically it goes to our homepage and you click get a consultation and you should be able to get there. We will repost those at the end of the webinar, and we will continue to have listings of all of those resources there. So I'm going to switch over a little technology here. And this is where you can find us every Thursday and make sure that you get your Q&A hosted by Ryan Hale, and our own Scott will be there as well. So we are taking note of all of your questions right now. We know that you have a lot of specialty questions specifically for your business. So again, do sign up for some one-on-one on that. Morgan, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to you if you are all ready.
I believe I am. Thank you.
And away you go.
Oh, perfect. That just. Okay, perfect. Like she said, my name is Morgan Johnson. I'm an associate attorney at Eldridge Brooks Partners, and Steve is on here as well, and he can jump in where he sees fit. But I'm going to give y'all a kind of brief overview of the employee retention tax credit. And just like everybody else, I am going to caveat it and say that more information is coming. One of the biggest takeaways you can get from my little spiel is that it's going to be better to wait on this than to jump on it initially, because there are a lot of changes, and lots of different people are interpreting the changes as differently. So we are looking for that guidance from the IRS, and are going to update everyone as soon as we know, and I'm sure this group will as well. But with that being said, let's just jump into it. Perfect. So the employee retention tax credit was initially provided to small businesses in the CARES Act way back when, and it was mutually exclusive with the PPP. So we hardly looked into it because most everyone we worked with got a PPP loan, so they weren't eligible to claim this tax credit. But now we get to talk about it because retroactively they have expanded the tax credit to include people who have received a PPP loan. Oh, like I said, and we're waiting guidance from the IRS, so we can move on. Okay, so here's what we know that was in the, back one. Yep, here's what we know was in the CARES Act, and this is the tax credit that you can apply for, or you can claim for 2020. So the time period is March 12th through the 2020 through December 31st. And the amount of credit is going to be 50% of employee qualified wages plus the employer portion of a group healthcare cost. So you're going to be maxed out. The eligible wages is going to be maxed out at $10,000 per employee for the entire year. So what that's going to mean is that the credit is going to be $5,000 for each employee if you can claim the max qualified wages. Also want to note here that employers who have over 100 full-time employees, meaning that they work 30 hours or more a week, those wages are only qualified if the employee was paid not to work. Now, if you have under 100 employees, then all wages count as qualified wages, even if they are working or they are not working during that time period. So to be eligible for this, you have to have been operational in 2020, and the operation has to have been fully or partially suspended due to government orders, or your gross receipts for at least one quarter in 2020 past March 12th you can show a 50% decline during the same calendar year of 2020, so quarter over quarter. So with those two qualifications, if you fall under the first portion, which most will, for each quarter, you have to qualify for each quarter, not just one quarter. And the fully or partially suspended means any type of curfew, any type of reduce in dine-in, capacity, stuff like that. So, and that has to come from a qualified government official. That's the state, that's a locality, that's the health department. Those would all qualify. So to qualify for the significant decline, if you don't qualify under the first prong, the second prong, the significant decline prong, I will note that you're eligible until your next quarter pops back up to 80% your gross receipts. So an example of that would be, and in quarter two, you had a 50% decrease, so you qualify. The next quarter, you had a decent quarter and you had 90%, 90% of from 2019. So the next quarter, quarter four, you would not be eligible. So it's the quarter following the one that you pop back up to 80%, if that makes sense. Okay, so now we've got these great changes that have came out, and it has changed the eligibility and the amount of credit that you can claim for 2021. So that you're only eligible to claim this credit for the first 2 quarters of 2021, and the amount of credit is significantly more, which is great. So the amount of credit has changed up to 70% of your qualified wages plus your healthcare cost, and your maximum, now this is big, your maximum is $10,000 per employee for each quarter. So what that's going to mean is that the maximum credit for each employee will be $14,000. So that's a pretty big bump. It also, just anybody that falls under the big employer, it jumps up from 100 to 500. So if you're under 500 employees, you don't have to consider what is a qualified wage versus what is not a qualified wage. And the eligibility has changed. Again, fully or partially suspended, same thing, but you only have to prove that your business has declined 20% instead of 50% for each quarter. So that's the first 2 quarters of 2021. Those will be the credits that you can claim for each quarter. Okay, a few pretty big considerations here. You cannot claim the credit on employee wages that you've used PPP loan funds for. So you can't use your funds that you got from your PPP loan and pay an employee and then also claim a credit on their wages. So you just have to make sure your accounting is in order there to make sure that you can prove what you did use your PPP funds for and what you did not, and what you did not, you're able to claim the credit on. And with that being said, we're advising people to, if they haven't filed for forgiveness yet from your first PPP, to wait, because the guidance might change on that. And also you want to be able to maximize both your forgiveness and your tax credit. Okay, and really the burning question is, how are we going to do this? That is a good question. I think right now the consensus is from tax professionals, payroll specialists, and attorneys are that you're able to claim this credit on your Form 941 for quarter 4. So you're filing your quarter 4 941, you can claim it for all of 2020, your entire credit amount on that form, if you haven't already filed that. Now, if you have already filed that, there are ways you can amend that. I'm not a tax professional. I might let Steve jump in on that front, but that's kind of the consensus right now. But as you see here, or if you're online right now, you can see that there are going to be other ways that you can apply. We just don't know them yet, but it is written into the law that there will be other ways prescribed by the IRS that you can apply for this credit. So really your action items, You just got to determine if you're an eligible employee or employer for the credit. Review your PPP paid wages, really taking an accounting of those. Like Mary Beth said, be best friends with your CPA or your payroll specialist. Like I said before, you haven't already filed for PPP forgiveness, might be advisable to wait. And continue prepping your Q4 filings if you haven't, but wait as long as possible in hopes that the IRS is going to clear some of this stuff up for us and we can get everybody the max amount of credits that they deserve under the statute. Oh, that's just my little e-card with my information. I wasn't able to follow the chat, but I'll try to answer some questions on the credit as well. And let
Yes,
Steve.
we will have some time for questions, which is a great thing. Steve, do you want to add anything?
Nice job, Morgan. Nice shameless plug. I like that. The only thing I would really just underscore is getting with your CPA, sharpening your pencil, and really taking a hard look at the credit. I know a lot of folks who got PPP might say, well, why do I care about this credit? Because, previously PPP excluded me from filing for it. Well, now that is not the case. But in theory, there should be some amount of wages that weren't covered by your PPP loan because that was for a very truncated period of time in 2020. So it's highly likely a lot of you would be eligible for the credit, and going forward on PPP round 2, take this into consideration for 2021 as the credit amounts are quite a bit more. And then the final thing I would say is it is yet undetermined as to the retroactive application of the thresholds and the credit amounts and the wage limits that have been determined. And so those may very well become retroactive. We'll wait to see, but again, just sort of waiting as long as you can to make your filings would be helpful. That's all I've got. Thanks for having us.
Fantastic. Yes. Well, I will say that we haven't lost very many people, so everybody's still on the edge of their seat to hear from you and talk to you all. So we do have time for questions, and so Chris, I'm just going to ask you to kind of tell us a little bit about what are some of the most common questions that you're there. A lot of you have been sending it to us as panelists, which is fantastic. You've also been putting it in the Q&A. We've been answering those as rapidly as possible, as individually as possible. A few of you have said that when you go to the SBTDC link and say get a consultation, your information is already there. Congratulations, you're already a client. So if for whatever reason you're already a client, you don't remember who your consultant is, what do you think is the best way to get a hold of us in general? Mary Beth?
I'd say call 479-575-5148 or email sbdc@uark.edu.
Okay, we'll put that, we will put that in the chat as well to make sure that everybody has that. So please just give us an email and or give us a call if you are already a client. We will get you re-hooked up. So we missed you. So Chris, what are some of the kind of common questions that are coming up that we might be able to dive into a little bit more? We are not hearing you, so we may have to try something else. Catherine, while Chris gets up and going, I know that you were answering a lot of questions. What were some of the most relevant for today? I know we can't answer everything and see into the future in some cases, but let's see what you've been seeing.
I guess it was a lot of questions around eligibility. So one of them would be if you started your business late, like only in December of 2019, or if you even just started in February of 2020, would you be eligible?
Yes.
Scott, I'm sorry. As long, I'll do the first part and Scott can jump in. As long as you were in business February 15, 2020, then that's what matters. Most people, I think, are concerned about how they then tell what their reductions are. And we went through that. One of Scott's slides discussed that. But then you still have to, but the problem is then you have to use Q1 of 2020 in comparison to the other quarters in 2020 and make sure you have that reduction, which is a challenge if you started your business on February 5th or February 10th, because then you really lost a month worth So that is a little bit more of a challenge in order to be able to prove. Scott,
Yeah.
what else do you think on that?
Yeah, so it's very simple, but when you say it out loud, it sounds complicated. So I'm going to point you to where the answer is in writing. If you'll go to the Paycheck Protection Program borrower application form, it's on the new open PPP1 as well as the second draw. It's on the second or third or fourth page, depending on which application you're looking at. And it describes it about halfway down the page in detail for you. And that's where that information comes from if you want to go and look.
And that application, again, is in our resources tab.
Yeah, and I'm going to remind again, everybody, that we're going to have Q&A sessions on Thursdays. So, and you don't have to register for those. So that's going to be another good place if you have specific questions about your business. Some other common questions were, can I reapply for EIDL or increase EIDL? And can I increase PPP1?
On EIDL, I tried to answer that to the person directly, but I think that anyway, in case they didn't get it, on EIDL, if you've already received the full EIDL loan, then you cannot reapply for the full EIDL loan. And then what was the other question, Catherine?
Can they go back and increase PPP1?
I also explained that, but I think I only explained it to the person who asked one of the questions. There are very specific requirements in order to increase your PPP. And that is, I'm just reading it, so sorry if I'm looking down. If a borrower returned all of the PPP loan, the borrower may reapply for a PPP loan in an amount the borrower is eligible for under PPP rules. So if you returned it, all of it, or if you returned part of it is the next could be a potential, then you can reapply for the amount that you returned. And then if a borrower didn't accept the full amount, because I had a few of those who intentionally were approved for $100,000 and they accepted 75, they can go back in and apply for that other piece. But I have not, I mean, anything that was used, like if something was accidentally done, or if the application was wrong, or if the banker said they had to do whatever, from what I can tell, so far, I have not seen any others who are going to be allowed to request the increase. Scott, what about you?
Yeah, so if you received it and didn't spend it all, or you didn't accept it all, or the big ones.
Chris, you now you have a voice. Oh, nope, we still don't have a voice for you. Unfortunately, you're gonna have to message us. I know there's always going to be a technical difficulty with these things. There is just there. Yes, ta-da!
Hey, I just had to re-click it again. I'm so sorry about that. But so I'm sorry if this is redundant, but this was a question that came up a couple times, and it was more about the rule for choosing a 12-month period to calculate your loan. So that has been asked a few different ways, but what is the rule on that? I'm sure, Scott, you covered that, and I apologize, but it would hurt to cover it again.
No, it's great. I'm happy to go over it as many times as we need. It's a lot of information, and it's a lot to hold in your head, and especially when you hear it in 1 hour. So you can use the Congress made it really easy to make it faster and simpler for everybody. So it is going to sound probably simpler than what we think that it should. But you can use all 12 months of 2019 or all 12 months of 2020. Or you can choose to use the 12 months immediately preceding the date of disbursement of draw 2.
Can you elaborate on that just a little bit, Scott, as far as the second part of it and what that means about prior to draw 2?
Yeah, so when you apply for your second draw, this is one of the things that we're not exactly clear on, because you would want to apply, but then you hadn't received it yet. So how would you be able to calculate it? Which is a question that we're still trying to get, but they do want you to at least be aware that that could be a possibility to you as you're getting ready to go in and to apply. So what you may want to do is look at your 2019, look at your 2020, and then look at what you think might be your 12 months prior to a potential disbursement for draw 2, and see what might potentially get you the most money or be the most beneficial to you. And then go in and talk with your banker, or even give the SBA a call, or talk with a consultant, or join the chat on Thursday, and maybe we'll have an answer for you by then.
Yeah, exactly. These questions that you're asking are very helpful because they do feed the we don't know yet questions. They also help us if anything has changed to know exactly what it is that we need to change. Catherine?
I had a question. Could you talk about the owner compensation replacement?
Yeah, so that gets complex and really difficult to understand over a Zoom call. So what I would just strongly suggest to you is to get in touch with me or one of the consultants at the center, and we would love to go over that with you individually.
Yeah. Question for Morgan and Steve is, we talked a lot about nonprofits in relationship to PPP, but not a lot in the employee retention tax credit. They're asking if nonprofits are eligible. They do not pay business income tax. So what does that look like for them?
For the tax credit?
Yeah, I'm asking Morgan and Steve.
Sorry, I was on mute. I actually, I don't know the answer to that. I would have to do a little bit of research on that to make sure.
Should be still applicable. They still get, nonprofits still pay and report employee taxes. I mean, they're not subject to income tax if they're a tax exempt nonprofit. So income tax is not taxable, but they still have to withhold and report employee wages. And so in theory, it would still be applicable. Good question. I've not researched that specific topic, but happy to follow up.
We'll put it in our folder of things that are good things to answer. Absolutely.
Right.
What else, Chris, as far as some themes that have come up and some of the other questions that we've answered individually?
Well, there were a couple questions about contractors and sole proprietors. What documentation would be necessary to establish the 25% reduction? And again, that might be repetitive, but it'd be good information to repeat.
There's a lot of details on that, Scott. I know that all the different entities are very individual. So I know that could be a big old long list, but if you can synthesize it just a little bit, that would be great.
Sorry, I was in the middle of answering a Q&A thing.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's great.
Are you talking? I'm sorry, I was doing the same thing and try to answer a Q&A. It's a problem.
I'm trying to read Mary Beth's Q&A.
One-on-one.
Are you talking about for
Forgiveness documentation? Well, the 25% down, what kind of documentation will they need? We know that.
Because I'm like, if I'm a hairstylist or if I don't necessarily have, it's not like I'm printing out monthly P&L for myself, but they have a lot of documentation. Most of the ones I know could pull up their phone and say, look, I'm down 14% this month. I mean, they know just from their Square and from whatever processing that they are using, they can usually tell and be able to push through that information. That's in my head. What do you think, Scott or Steve or anybody?
Yeah, and a couple of the different scenarios that you're looking at, Scott, are the quarter to quarter, 2019 quarter compared to 2020 quarter, and then you do have the full year option. Might be a little bit more difficult, but that is the other option in the comparison of documentation. And then to your point, Mary Beth, that you are going to have it on the end. So at the end of all of this, in applying for forgiveness and some of those things, you're still going to need that.
Yeah, you're going to need it.
Amy,
go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, one point and follow up on that, and I've been waiting for the appropriate time to insert this. We do have a client that is going through a audit right now for the PPP loan, and because they were over the $2 million threshold. It is a restaurant client. It's a large one, and I understand we're talking to the small business forum here, but if anyone does have that, or if they have a concern or want us to help review the file, we do have experience in that. We helped out with several clients trying to just make sure that, as best we can and as best they can, stay within the guidelines. And a lot of times that's super subjective. And Morgan can jump in here. I wasn't involved on this side of it, but there is some protection against penalties and fines and any sort of criminal sort of a claim or aspect to your filing if you've had an attorney review and sign off, a letter opinion that you've met all those requirements. I just wanted to throw that out there. Probably not applicable for 99% of the cases out there, But on the off chance there's, concern about that, we're happy to, help review it.
Mhm. Fantastic. Morgan, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you said it well. There are some protections laid out in that, and always good to get extra set of eyes on the evidence that's being requested of you.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a great question in the Q&A, and probably for potentially for Stephen Morgan on the application. They're asking sole proprietor partnership S Corp LLC, and they're an LLC that is chosen to be treated as an S Corp for tax purposes. Which box should they check?
Tax status.
Okay.
I check it as an
Tax.
S Corp.
Okay, fantastic. Recommended for sure. I think one of the burning questions for everyone is timing on some things. So we all went through the PPP1 together. So what do we know about what the timing of when things are going to happen? Things are happening right now, and kind of what we feel like this path is going to be. And again, we encourage everyone to please stay in touch with us on a regular basis. We're not lawyers, but we're reading documents like lawyers on a daily basis. So please, what does that look like, Mary Beth? What are we kind of looking at as far as the next few months between now and March? What can people expect?
I was typing an answer again. I'm sorry. I need to just focus on one thing and not both.
You do a really good job of looking like you're paying attention.
I was totally answering a question to somebody, so I apologize. So somebody, are you saying in general, what is it going to look, what are the next few weeks going to look like?
Yeah, next few weeks,
chaos.
what are some timing? Yeah.
Chaos, we're going to try to stay on top of absolutely everything. We have a few of us who are just primarily working on this particular subject. We'll be working, we're trying to get documentation from banks, trying to get everybody to understand how the different banks are handling it and those kind of things. But let's face it, the money will run out. I assume it will run out prior to March 31. So that's why I'm always encouraging people to talk to their banks and talk to their CPAs to try to start getting that information sooner rather than later, because it looks like by next week, midweek, late week, early week, whatever, by next week, the majority of the banks, at least in Northwest Arkansas, are going to have started.
Absolutely. So be ready, and we are going to be ready with you. Any other outstanding messages that you're seeing, Catherine or Chris, that we want to address kind of, or that might be really pertinent to all of our audience that everybody needs, and since we're recording this and forever and ever documented?
I do just want to make sure one more thing. I think I forgot to mention that the deadline for all of this is March 31st, and funds are limited, and it is first come, first served based on approval. So I would get to this as quickly as you can.
Yes, as Mary Beth mentioned, there are more funds available, may not be running out in the quick time frame that it did for the very first outing of this, but that does not mean that it's not going to. Catherine or Chris?
I think there was a
Amy-
clarification about the opportunity zones versus
Right.
low-income zones. So
Yeah, I just replied to that. Sorry, I was just trying to provide something on, the question is on opportunity zone versus low to moderate income census tracts, those kind of things. So I wasn't going to give 3 different mapping systems when I was trying to help people understand. As I'd said earlier on when I was going through the slides, that this SBA will likely be issuing something, and we'll have something to where people can then go on their website and enter in their business address, and it will click out if they are an eligible person or not. I was just trying to provide something that might give them guidance. In several places, the low to moderate income census tracts are the same as opportunity zones, but in other places they are not necessarily. So sorry if I tried to say that I don't think I ever said that was an official way you were going to look at it, but sorry if you took it that way. But I was just trying to give some kind of help for people to understand maybe if they might qualify or not, that they could then continue to further research it.
It's one of the absolute great examples of things that are kind of a moving target, and we are getting those resources as lined up as possible, as soon as possible. Yes, Chris.
One last thing, this came up, and again, I apologize if this is redundant, but the requirement to show the 25% reduction in gross receipts for nonprofits. I don't know if we talked much about nonprofits.
And nonprofits gross receipts, correct.
So that is something I'm trying to get a definition on gross receipts There is an IRS definition, which is very broad, but there's some indications that the legislation changed some of that or might make some exceptions. We're not clear. It's a question that we're trying to get clarification on. But the typical IRS definition is basically any income that you do receive. As far as I'm aware, I'm not an accountant, so maybe Stephen Morgan would know better.
What was the question again, Amy? I'm sorry.
What's gross receipts for nonprofits?
Well, I know that contributions would be in there, and as long as they're not restricted, right? They have restricted and unrestricted, so I assume that all contributions would be in there.
Yeah,
Should be the
that was the
largest.
main part of the question, is if contributions would be counted. Yes, again.
Steve, what kind of?
Yeah, that's my thought too, Mary. But to be honest, I don't know that nuance. My assumption would be all non-restricted grant funds. I mean, most nonprofits have grant funds. To the extent they're restricted, that's a specific, donor bucket of funds that you got to spend certain things on. It would have to be, in my mind, all unrestricted grant funds and public charity donations
Mhm.
have to be.
Absolutely. Well, I think you all have done an amazing job. We are taking another moment and posting all of our links for everyone. We're going to go ahead and wrap everything up. We appreciate all of you being here. We are going to, the rules again are being released routinely, and interpretation change every minute, every new release. So please sign up as a client, or if you're already a client, give us an email, and attend the PPP Q&A session that is beginning tomorrow. So we're going to go ahead and post those. Visit our website on a regular basis, because this webinar will be here. The PowerPoint presentations will be there, and we will continue to update our toolbox on a regular basis. Catherine, will you sign us off for the day?
Absolutely, Amy. I know we have directed you to get consultation, and we are here to help you. I just want to remind you, we're not your only resource. So do please check in with your banker, and also connect with your CPA. They're going to be tremendous resources for you as well. Again, copy the links, check back on our website. We're going to have, this presentation, a toolbox, and more resources and FAQs. And again, as we mentioned, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces. So as we find out more, we will post more. So thank you all for being with us today. Stay in touch, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yes, thank you. Thanks all.